All right. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين اللهم اجعلنا منهم سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وعملا متقبلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. We start as we always do, first and foremost by praising and thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, showing Him our utmost gratitude and appreciation, and asking Allah to bless, protect, honor, and compliment our beloved Prophet, our messenger, our role model, Muhammadur Rasulullah, his family, friends, companions, and everyone that follows the way until the end of time. O Allah, include us from amongst them. O Allah, you are so perfect, we have no knowledge except for what you have taught us. So teach us those things that are beneficial to us and allow us to benefit from what you have taught us and increase us in beneficial knowledge and accepted actions. Assalamu alaikum everyone. I apologize for the late start. I didn't know actually I was at 7 o'clock. But I guess start time we're probably just 5-10 minutes late, so I don't think we're too off right now. So last time, in our discussion about tazkiyah and purifying ourselves and improving our heart and connection with Allah, we talked about one of the first steps that we need, which is having adab, which is having a type of respect and courtesy when it comes to dealing with Allah. How do I come before Allah? How do I interact with my Creator? What is my status and my level when I interact and come before Allah? And we also talked about how that includes a type of haya, a type of shyness that I have, that how can I do something that Allah is not going to like, that Allah is not going to approve of, and how that should shape our mindset and shape our actions. Now, the next two things that we'll get into, or the two opposites, is going to be in regards to sincerity and being insincere when it comes to the actions that we do. And this essentially is, I know we had our first topic last time, but this essentially is one of the main foundations with everything that we do. Because now that I'm on this journey, now that I want to clean and purify my heart, now that I want to become a better Muslim, and now that I know how to focus and interact with Allah, am I even doing this for the right reason? Am I even doing this with the correct goal in mind? And is every step I take done so for the right reason and purpose? And that's where it comes down to our sincerity and our good intention in all of these things that we do, right? And to balance that, it's not just having a good intention, but it's how do I ensure that I don't have a bad intention? How do I ensure that my reason, my purpose for doing something is good, is clean, is pure? And so, when we talk about sincerity, we're essentially talking about the Arabic word ikhlas. The Arabic word ikhlas, right? And so sincerity is that character trait because this reminds us of this important and heavy quality that we need when we come closer to Allah. And so before we come close to Allah, before we start that way, we need to make sure that that journey in and of itself is good, clean, pure, and safe. Right? And we find this, done by Muslims throughout, Islam from the very beginning. This is why Imam al-Bukhari, rahimahullah, he starts off with his Sahih with the hadith of niyyah, with the hadith of intention. He says, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, that actions are only going to be judged, actions are only going to be rewarded, actions are only going to be given consideration, they're only going to have value in the sight of Allah based on what their intention was, based on the sincerity or lack thereof that was given to the action that is being done. And so he teaches us a very important lesson that he himself, essentially is putting himself, all right, now that I am writing this book, am I writing this book to show off? Am I writing this book to be remembered in history forever? Am I writing this book so people know I'm a scholar? He's checking himself, no, my actions need to be done for the correct, right reason. And it's also a reminder for the reader. The reader is, why are you reading this book? Why are you studying this book? Why are you learning hadith? Is it so you can quote this to people? Is it so you can tell other people why you're right and they're wrong? No, this should be so that you can learn what the Prophet ﷺ said and become a better Muslim yourself. All of these things are included in why so many scholars start off their books with this hadith, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. So that we know that this journey of reading, this journey of learning, this journey of writing is done so in a way that is going to be pleasing to Allah, that's going to make Allah happy, that will be accepted by Allah. And so in anything that we do, anything that we start, it's this repeated thing of check your intentions. Why am I doing something? What is the purpose and goal behind me doing something? And we want it always to be sincerely and solely for the sake of Allah. Because if our intention is not sincere, if the reason why we're doing it is not cleanly and purely for the sake of Allah, then all of this effort that we did, all of the energy and time that we put in, can end up being a waste of time, can end up being something that ends up completely going to waste, right? If we think about in this life, if we do things for other than a good reason, you still get some benefit out of it, right? If you go to schools for the sheer sake of, I'm going to learn just so I can make gobbles of money and rip people, basically I'm going to learn how to scam people, I'm going to learn how to steal people's money. Well, you'll still learn some valuable information, although it's bad, you'll still learn some valuable information that allows you to do something, that allows you to gain some tangible talent in life in general, right? Or if somebody, whatever other profession they want to go into and they do so for wrong reasons, they do so for incorrect reasons, they still learn bits and tidbits on the way that can be used in life. But if I pray for the sake of other than Allah, if I fast for the sake of other than Allah, if those things are done incorrectly, I don't get any benefit out of it. If it ends abruptly, if it ends in the wrong way, there's nothing tangible that I leave with. There's nothing tangible that I leave with. It essentially goes straight down the garbage, as opposed to other things. There's still some lingering benefit that can be taken, right? And we find, in this class and in many other, walks of Islam, right? We start off with this hadith of إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, so that we know, and it always serves as a check and a reminder that are we doing things for Allah? And this is such a beautiful way for us to remind ourselves. And this was also said in the context of hijrah. This was also said in the context of Muslims going from the city of Mecca, moving to the city of Medina. As if again to somewhat emphasize, when you start this journey, when you make this journey, before you start this journey, at the beginning, check, why am I going to Medina? Am I going to Medina because there's some benefit? Am I going to Medina because life is easier there? I'm going to Medina because there's agriculture there? Or am I going simply because I want to leave this place so I can worship Allah? Right? And that sets up the stage even for the time of the Sahaba, even for the generation of the Sahaba radiallahu anhu. Allah is pleased with them. And so now when we look at the word for sincerity, when we look at the word ikhlas, we find a number of definitions that help us get an idea about how this word is used and why this word is chosen. Right? Linguistically, the word ikhlas comes from the root letters kha, lam, and sad. Right? And this has a meaning of cleaning something and refining something. Right? You want to make something pure. You want to clean something. And for something to be khalis, it's similar to something being safi. For those that speak Urdu, something that's saf, something that's clean, something that is clean. Right? The slight distinction is that khalis is something that was dirty and then you make it clean. Whereas something that's safi was something that was always clean. And this is why in all of our contexts we always use ikhlas, because we're not filthy and dirty, but there's always room for us to grow. There's always these improvements that we can make. We're not standard pure. We're not standard clean without any issues and defects. Right? And so we're starting off with the state of having some issues, and we want to clean ourselves, want to improve ourselves, want to better ourselves. And so, again, one of the original ways this word was used, like why the Arabs first used this, was essentially because they want to, when they were churning butter, right, when you have milk straight out of the cow, right, sometimes you're going to get some dirt, you're going to get some debris, and then when you churn the butter, you don't want anything other than milk in your butter. And so you clean all of that stuff out. You remove all of the filth that's in there, so that your end product is clean and is pure, right? And this happens to many other foods and many other old processes that we have of, making things and things like that. We want to remove the impurities because things can always fall in. And so we see how that can be used in our hearts as well. Our hearts, other dirty things can get inside, so we want to remove and purify and sift all of these other things out. And so another word or verb that comes with it is akhlasa. This is now going to be, how do I do ikhlas? Right? And this is going to mean to make something else pure, to clean something else. Right? And even an aspect of choosing and selecting something. That I chose something that is good. I chose something that is good, pure. Now, when it comes to the more technical definitions, when it comes to how the scholars talk about ikhlas in a spiritual sense, in a sense of doing actions, in a sense of doing good deeds, there's a number of other definitions and ways that they have to explain it. Right, one thing that they do is, tanqiyatu shay'i wa tahdhibu, to clean something and purify it and refine it and discipline it. Right? But one of the key definitions that we have is intending that through one's worship, the object of worship be worshipped alone without anything else. That whatever it is that you're worshipping, meaning Allah in our case, that is the sole thing that is being worshipped. هو القصد بالعبادة إلى أن يعبد المعبود بها وحده. That when I say, okay, I'm praying and I'm worshipping Allah, that there should be no other room of anything but Allah entering into that equation. It's me and Allah. People aren't involved, status and other bits of accountability or respect I can get for that shouldn't be included. It should simply be, all right, I want to worship Allah. Is Allah being worshipped to the extent He should be worshipped? Right? And then another possible meaning is tasfiyatu sidri wal qawli wal amal. That we want to clean, we want to purify somebody's inward state, their outward state, and their actions and statements as well. So it's not just the things that I say and the things that I do that are clean and pure, but when I intend and want to do those things from the inside, is that also clean? Is that also pure? Am I doing it for the right reason? Another definition would be purifying the heart from every blemish that tarnishes its purity. Right? To clean our hearts from anything that can dirty our heart. تَخْلِيصُ الْقَلْبِ مِنْ كُلِّ شَوْبٍ يُقَدِّرُ صَفَاءَهُ. That our heart can get some filth, our heart can get something dirty, and we want to make sure that it's clean and pure from any of these impurities, any of these issues that can come to it. Another way is purifying one's actions of anything that might make an individual subject to being accused of something doubtful or insincere, and purifying one's actions from anything that could mix with those actions and dirty them. Right? تَصْفِيَةُ الْعَمَلِ مِنَ التُّهْمَةِ وَالْخَلَلِ. That when I do something, nobody else should put doubts, nobody else should think I'm doing it for another reason. Right? It's done again for a clean soul, pure, single purpose. And then one of the most simple ones, but clear ones, that an individual does not seek a witness, doesn't seek somebody to view, to look at their actions other than Allah. أَلَّا تَطْلُبَ لِعَمَلِكَ شَاهِدًا غَيْرَ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى. That you don't care or you don't even want anybody else to see you doing this action. Right? That if nobody was to see any good thing that I ever did, that would be fine. If nobody was to ever see me pray, ever see me donate, ever see me read Quran, ever see me do dhikr, nobody ever saw me do anything good in my entire life. Everybody thinks I'm bad. Like, how are you even Muslim? I've never seen you pray. Every time I go to the masjid, everybody's just always at the other masjid, right? that doesn't have an impact on me, that doesn't change my goal, that doesn't change my intention. Because I'm doing it for the same clean, pure reason, regardless of who's there, regardless of what's involved, regardless of the situation and circumstance. And so these are some of the key features that all of these, definitions have there are some key features that all of these definitions have that are common amongst all of them, and that it's our ikhlas, our sincerity is making our acts of worship for Allah alone. That it's simply and solely for the sake of Allah. Nothing else is involved in that equation. So it can be removing distractions from our mind. It could be removing other reasons from our heart. It could be removing any other vices that come into our heart and soul. And so by not wanting other people or anyone to see me doing anything good, it's not that if people see it, it's wrong, but I don't have any care for that. I'm not seeking that. It doesn't change me to when people see me doing something good. And so we do things so that Allah is pleased with us, not so that other people have anything to say. Not so that other people say, oh, you are good, oh, that was beautiful, oh, that was amazing. Right? That's the last thing that we want. And so making your actions correct and pure, doing them in a correct manner. And to, again, just to summarize all of this, it's making myself, my actions, my intentions, my statements, everything I do for Allah alone, and get rid of anything else that's involved in that. Anybody else, any other benefit, any other goal beyond that. With that in mind, there's a slight caveat to have, and that it's, we always stress on doing everything for the sake of Allah, and it should only be for the sake of Allah. But sometimes we maybe go a little bit overboard, and we say the only thing we can think of is that it is only for the sake of Allah, without anything else. Without anything else. And that is not necessarily correct. Because we can do things for good reasons that sooner or later end up being for the sake of Allah. Right? So somebody said, I'm going to come to the masjid because the Prophet ﷺ told me to, and I'm doing so for the sake of Allah. But we get other good benefits that are sooner or later for the sake of Allah. So I'm going to come, I get to leave my house, I get to take a break, I get to walk a little bit, I get to go outside, I get to walk in the parking lot. All of these things, they don't contradict doing it for the sake of Allah. Getting air outside and taking a quick walk, it doesn't contradict doing something for the sake of Allah. You're not doing it for another reason so somebody else can praise you and think you're good. So this is also a good, valid intention that we can add in. Another common thing that we do, many of us, we come to the masjid, we find, some of our friends, we find people to talk to. So again, this is another good thing that one way, shape or form down the line, Allah encourages us to interact with Muslims, to say salam to one another, to be kind and courteous with other Muslims. And so this, sooner or later, is again for the sake of Allah. So we can have other intentions, we can have other purposes that aren't literally for the sake of Allah, as long as they don't contradict that. As long as they don't go against being sincere. Because sooner or later those things are good, one way or another. And this is why some scholars, when they talk about grammatically the hadith, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, actions are only by their intentions. The point here is that some narrations say, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. They are by plural intentions, meaning you can have multiple intentions. You can have multiple reasons for doing something. Right? You're not locked into one single intention. You're not locked into one single reason and purpose. Right? So when it comes to, like we said, coming to the masjid, all right, I'm coming to pray. When I come to the masjid, it encourages me to do my dhikr. I say salam to people, I get some fresh air, I walk outside. Right? These are all things that are good, and none of these contradict doing so for the sake of Allah. Right? Or, I want to give some food to my neighbor. right? I want to do so for the sake of Allah, and then this way I also get to talk to somebody. This way I'm also building bonds, and I'm also ensuring that if I ever need anything, if I ever leave my house, that perhaps they'll be more inclined to help and watch my house if I'm ever leaving, right? You can have these other reasons in mind as long as they don't contradict, as long as they don't go against whatever we know from the Quran and Sunnah. And so we can have these other intentions as well, right? And even an example given is the story of the Baghiya, the story of the lewd woman, the prostitute essentially, who would, this was her job for years, and then she finds, a thirsty animal on the side, and she uses her shoe to get some water and give it to that animal, and because of that, Allah forgives her. In some sense, is her intention really just, I'm doing so only for the sake of Allah? There's a poor little animal, I want to help the animal. And so it's not always that immediate cognition of this is for the sake of Allah, right? It's doing things that we know are good because one way or another it pleases Allah. Now, with that in mind, with that caveat in mind, we can now get into some ayat and some hadith that help us explain it and give us some more detail and some more meat into this concept of, ikhlas and sincerity. Some of these ayat were taken from Imam Nawawi's Riyadh al-Salihin. His style in his book, Gardens of the Righteous, is to take a believer from step one all the way until the end of being a strong believer, and he will always start off his chapters mentioning some ayat about the topic. And so his first chapter is on ikhlas, on sincerity. And so the first ayah that he brings is from Surah Al-Bayyinah, where Allah, He says, وَمَا أُمِرُوا إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مُخْلِصِينَ لَهُ الدِّينَ حُنَفَاءَ وَيُقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَيُؤْتُوا الزَّكَاةَ وَذَلِكَ دِينُ الْقَيِّمَةِ. That these people, these believers, they weren't commanded to do anything except worship Allah sincerely. لِيَعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مُخْلِصِينَ. To worship Allah with ikhlas. حُنَفَاء, in a state of pure monotheism, and to establish salah, the ritual prayer, and to give their zakah. And this is the correct religion and way of life. And so the description that Allah gives when He mentions that their first command was to do ibadah, their first command was to worship Allah, He highlighted that they do so as mukhlisin, as people of ikhlas, as people of sincerity, right? And this is an action of the heart, again, like we said, where nothing else is wanted, nothing else is desired except for the pleasure of Allah, either immediately or through other steps, right? And this is a requirement for our actions to be accepted. If we do things for other than Allah, if we do things to show off, Allah doesn't accept it. Allah doesn't give us the reward for it. In some cases, as we'll see, later on, it can be a cause for us to gain sin and punishment, right? And so this is the primary qualifier, that when we do worship, we do so mukhlisin. We do so mukhlisin, sincerely devoting ourselves in that. And then Allah says that they are hunafa, that they have an inclination, they have a mail, they're ma'ilun an shirk, that they are leaning away from, idolatry and paganism. They're leaning away from misguidance and dalal, and they have an inclination away from, adyan batila, from false religions. And this term of hanif and hunafa is a term that Allah often uses when He describes Ibrahim alayhi salam, right? That He describes both Ibrahim and the legacy and millah of Ibrahim. وَاتَّبِعْ مِلَّةَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ حَنِيفًا. Follow the way, the religion, the legacy of Ibrahim in a pure monotheistic way, right? And then we have ذَلِكَ دِينُ الْقَيِّمَةِ. This is the correct, proper way, the true way of this religion. And so again, the highlighting factor here is the primary command that Allah gave to all religious communities. Worship me sincerely, purely, cleanly for my sake. Don't bring anybody else into that equation. The next ayah that Imam Nawawi he brings in that discussion is of Surah Al-Hajj, when Allah talks about slaughter and sacrifice, لن ينال الله لحومها ولا دماؤها ولكن يناله التقوى منكم. That the meat and blood of your sacrificial animals, they don't reach Allah. It's not when you sacrifice an animal, the meat goes up to Allah, or Allah gets the blood of that animal. None of that goes to Allah physically. This actually ends up, the blood goes into the ground and earth, and the meat goes to people that eat it. وَلَكِنْ يَنَالُهُ التَّقْوَى مِنْكُمْ. The thing that goes up to Allah is your taqwa, is the fact that you did so for the right reason, the fact that you did so out of awe and fear and care of Allah. And so when we do udhiyah, when we do this action of ritual slaughter, right, it's not the physical thing that really matters, rather it's Allah wanting to see our taqwa. Did we protect ourselves from punishment by obeying His commands and staying away from His prohibitions? Did we do so for His sake? So when we bought that animal, when we gave time to go see that animal and slaughter that animal, if we physically going to slaughter, was this for anybody else? Was it to show off, somebody bought a goat for 200, I got a goat for 500, and it's just a show of I got a better goat? And you can do so for a good reason. Allah, I have more money and I want to give the best thing, the biggest animal, so more people can eat. But at the same time, it can be, I want people to know I got a really big animal, right? And so it's that balance that should always be kept in mind. And when we are slaughtering, when we are doing these things, we want to do so in a way that's going to make Allah happy. We see that the Prophet, when he went to Hajj, he had 100 camels and he slaughtered 63 himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And none of this was to show off and be like, look at all these animals I'm slaughtering. Look at me, look how great I am. I just want to do this to make Allah happy. Right? And that wasn't muddled and dirtied with any of those false intentions. And obviously udhiyah and sacrifice follows in the footsteps, follows in the legacy of Ibrahim alayhi salam, who again is the hallmark of doing things with ikhlas, doing things with sincerity, doing things for the sake of Allah. So all of this again ties back to sincerity and ensuring our hearts are doing this for the right reason. And an example is given is, imagine your heart as that milk that has these tiny rocks, right? That has the little dirt, the little pieces of grass, whatever, and we want to just pick out piece by piece all of these things, right? So that our hearts are clean, that our hearts are pure, that our hearts don't have any distractions away from Allah. The next ayah that he mentions and brings, he says, قُلْ إِن تُخْفُوا مَا فِي صُدُورِكُمْ أَوْ تُبْدُوهُ يَعْلَمْهُ اللَّهُ. That regardless of whether you hide what's in your inner self, inside of your chest, inside of your hearts, or you openly publicize it and you tell the whole world, Allah knows it and Allah is completely aware of it. So whether we do something in private, whether we do something in public, whether it's a thought, a whisper, a conversation you have inside of your head, Allah is fully aware of it. And so we can't even hide our thoughts from Allah. So we can tell ourselves this is for the right reason. We can, say it as much as we want, but Allah knows the little feeling in our heart. Allah knows the little whispers that we have inside of our heart. And again, this comes back to sincerity, even though this is more about the knowledge of Allah, it's sincerity because He knows if our heart went the slightest bit away from doing it solely for Him. He knows if our heart had that little whisper of, what if that person sees me? What if that person, compliments me after I do this? What if that person, praises me or wants to thank me for something that I just did? Those little tiny things, even if we don't say it, even if it doesn't happen, those little whispers are things that Allah is aware of, and Allah can hold us accountable for it if we dwell on it, and if we keep growing those feelings in our heart. And those were some ayat where Allah, He kind of challenges and pushes the boundary of doing so with sincerity. And then the Prophet ﷺ also talks about sincerity and explains some of the confusion that might arise in some situations. Right? Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh, he said the Prophet ﷺ was asked, who will be the most fortunate, who will be the most lucky to get your intercession on the Day of Judgment. Meaning, who will be somebody that is blessed, lucky enough and fortunate enough that you will vouch for them in front of Allah. And the Prophet ﷺ said, I had a feeling that no one else would ask me this question before you, because I know you're so eager to learn and to gain knowledge through hadith. He said, the most fortunate people to receive my intercession on the Day of Judgment are those who say, La ilaha illallah khalisan min qalbi. Those who say there is no deity, there's no God, there's nothing worthy of worship except the one true God, Allah. And they say so how? Khalisan min qalbi. Truly and sincerely from the bottom of their heart. With no other reason, with no other purpose, with no other gain. And this is harder for us to understand today because very few people today say La ilaha illallah for any worldly benefit. But think about, a couple hundred years ago, think about after the Prophet passes away for 700, 800, 900 years when Islam is the dominant force in the world. You say La ilaha illallah, you get a lot of perks. You get to now be in the prime of global civilization. You get to travel more easily. You get different protections. You don't need to pay certain types of taxes. You get a lot of benefits. You get a lot of perks if you say La ilaha illallah, right? You can reject and disbelieve all you want in your heart, but if you say that, they're going to treat you in a better way because of the status and benefit given to the way that the world ran at that time based off of religion. And obviously today we don't necessarily, you don't say La ilaha illallah to get the perks and benefits today. So it's a bit more harder for us to see this, but we can understand a time when saying the shahada, was something that gave you more honor, more izzah, more power, more strength, more reputation in society. Right? And again, to highlight that by doing so, you're not doing so for some worldly benefit. You're not doing so to save yourself in this world. You're doing so because you know it's the truth. You're saying so because there's no other reality that you have in your heart. It's clean, it's pure, it's for the sake of Allah. It's going above the bare minimum that's required for basic iman. Right? It's something that comes from our heart and our soul. And this is the type of shahada, this is the type of La ilaha illallah that's going to be something that saves people from the fire of hell, that gets people into the gardens of Jannah. And we talked about the hadith of innamal a'malu binniyat as well, of again prioritizing and doing things for the sake of Allah. So now, with some of that stuff in mind, what are some practical ways that we can help get ourselves into a place and situation that we do things with sincerity, that we remove the other intentions out of our heart, that we remove the other goals that contradict doing so for the sake of Allah out of our heart. And some of these examples, some of these tips are essentially you go above what's needed so that you make it to a proper level, right? It's like if you need to get somewhere in 7 minutes, you try to do so in 5, just so you ensure you get there in 7, as opposed to let me try to get there in 9 when you have to, right? You always push yourself harder, so that at the very minimum, even if you fall short, you still are in the green. You still are in the good. The first thing is to avoid recognition. To avoid recognition, right? That learn to be completely 100% okay and content with being anonymous. That when we do something amazing, when we do something good, when we do something beautiful that takes us a lot of effort, takes us a lot of energy, do your best to hide it. Do your best not to let other people know about it, right? And gear your thoughts and desires to prefer that nobody knows what you did, that nobody can, find out, what you did. And this may not be applicable to everything, right? You're not going to, put a curtain on the side of the masjid and just pray in a corner and nobody knows who you are, right? But other actions that you do that aren't public actions, do those in a way that you hide them. Do those in a way that other people aren't going to find out about them. And the practical way to do this would be, number one, have some actions, and we should always have some actions that are always done in private. That are always done, or essentially not even your household knows that you're doing it. There should be some time that you have for dua that nobody sees. There should be some time that you have for dhikr, remembering Allah, that nobody sees. There should be some type of recitation of Quran that nobody sees. There should be some type of giving sadaqah, giving charity that nobody sees. Obviously if you are giving money that's not hard cash, the masjid is going to see your name on the digital receipt, right? So there's some things you just can't get away from. But if you have the opportunity, maybe try to go out of your way to give it in cash, so nobody's actually going to see it. And the masjid's not going to know who put that in there. Or whatever organization. Right? So force yourself to do something where nobody can know who did that or where did that come from. Right? So focus and fill in one of those things. And we're not going to be able to do everything. Not all of us are going to have a time to donate and to read Quran and to make dua and to pray, to do this, this, and this. But pick one. Pick one thing that maybe you do weekly or something that's your habit. This is my one action that nobody's going to know about. That nobody's going to, not even my spouse. Because I do so when they're not even there. Not even my children, not even my parents. Right? And that gives us, a sense of this action is something so special and private between me and Allah. Nobody else knows. Nobody else knows about it. Right? And in some sense, it's sometimes we commit sins, we do things that are wrong and haram in the same way. I don't want anybody to know. And then we forget Allah knows, but I don't want any human being to know about this. So have that same mindset when it comes to some of our good deeds. And that's going to force us to do what? It's going to really humble us and make sure that it cannot be done for another reason. Unless we go out and tell people, which is the second test after that. That once I do that thing, it may be very easy to end up saying or slipping, oh yeah, I did that. Or I did that. Or yeah, last night I was praying, or I fasted, whatever that day. But always hold yourself and check yourself to not even mention those actions and deeds. Number 2 is a self-reproach, and always checking yourself. That before an action, in the middle of an action, at the end of an action, ask yourself, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? And if the answer that you give is for anything other than Allah, then we want to change and correct that. Then we want to fix that. We want to get rid of those other things. Remind ourselves that Allah does not have to accept your actions because you did it. I can pray for 10 hours. Allah can say, I don't care. If it wasn't done for His sake, if it wasn't done sincerely for Him. And always follow up the things that you do. And many people always ask, well, okay, I ask myself that, but I don't know. I ask myself that, but I don't know. The simplest thing, I would say, and this works for most people, if you are worried, am I doing this for the sake of Allah? That's your sign you're doing it for the sake of Allah. If you think, oh no, did I do that for the right reason? Was my intention good in this? That's most likely your sign. The fact that you care about that is your sign that yes, most likely for the sake of Allah. So that's a good sign. If you're worried, am I doing this for the right reason? That's usually often a good sign. Yes, that is for the right reason. Number 3, we kind of already mentioned this, but cherish your hidden actions. Cherish and be happy, be pleased with those actions that you do that nobody else knows about. That nobody else knows about. And it's something the Prophet, he even tells us, وَصَلُّوا بِاللَّيْلِ وَالنَّاسُ نِيَامٌ, and pray at night when everybody else is sleeping. Right? And that's perhaps one of the reasons why praying at night, tahajjud, qiyamul layl, is so beautiful and so important, because A, is done at home most of the time, and it's when everybody else is sleeping. Right? So very few people can come to know about that. Very few people are aware that you are doing that. And so it's one of those things that's very special and very private. Number 4, be content as a follower. Be happy to just go with the flow and not be the leader, not being the important person, not being the one in charge. Right? So that when you're in a group, it's okay if I'm not the one people are talking to. I'm not the one everybody's, asking something to. I'm not the one that people are, crowding around and saying, oh, you did this, oh, you did that, oh, you did that, oh, you did that. Right? And this is, again, a very hard test where, you can have two people who did the same good thing and they're in the same group. You may be one person, you did the same thing, your friend, your brother, your sibling did the same thing. And everybody's talking to the other person, wow, mashallah, you're so great, that was so beautiful, how did you do that? And you're sitting there just like, I did the same thing. Why isn't anybody telling me anything? Right? And it's something that hurts, it's something that, challenges you a lot. But this is something to work on, and in that moment, remind yourself of, Allah knows I did it. These people can praise me, reward me, give me 1,000 awards and plaques and recognitions and ceremonies. They don't get me into Jannah. And that's another way to help us, that all of the praise and recognition that we get in this world, nobody has the power to do anything other than give me a high five. Give me some money, give me a plaque. It's only Allah that will forgive me. It's only Allah that is going to get me into Jannah. So His approval, His reward is the thing that I need the most. And then number 5, learn to love and reject for Allah's sake. Build relationships with people rooted in the mindset of, my relationship with you is for the sake of Allah. My relationship with you is to please Allah. My relationship with you is based and grounded on Allah. Right? And this is one of the most beautiful and praiseworthy things. The Prophet says that people who love one another for the sake of Allah, they're going to have mimbars, they're going to have pulpits of light on the Day of Judgment that people are going to be jealous of. Right? And so have relationships that are built, around the love of Allah, around doing so for the sake of Allah. And, that should be the primary reason. Right? And again, we can have other things beyond that don't contradict that, right? So all of us here, our love, our community, our bond with one another, our love for one another should be for the sake of Allah, because we are all Muslim. It is because we have Iman that we love one another. Less than that, but still okay, is, oh, you're from my country, you speak my language, you eat the same food I do. That's not wrong, but you need to love them because of their Iman more than you love them based on their country, right? If there's a non-Muslim from your country and you love them more than a Muslim from anywhere, right? That's something we need to check on, because our primary thing should be doing things, for the sake of Allah, right? And then the point number 6, the last thing would be, even again when we do get recognition, we should still be hoping for, striving to not care for that, but still hoping for the reward of Allah. Right? And this, Allah, He reminds us of this in Surah Al-Dahr. إِنَّمَا نُطْعِمُكُمْ لِوَجْهِ اللَّهِ لَا نُرِيدُ مِنْكُمْ جَزَاءً وَلَا شُكُورًا. We gave people food, we did all of these good deeds, and people are coming and thanking them. Jazakallahu khairan, may Allah reward you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. So they're getting that reward, they're getting that FaceTime, they're getting the benefits in this life. But that's not their goal. Even when they're getting it, that's not their goal. إِنَّمَا نُطْعِمُكُمْ لِوَجْهِ اللَّهِ. We did so for the sake of Allah. We don't want gratitude. We don't want appreciation in this world. Right? That doesn't mean they're saying, take it out of my face, I don't want it, I'm going to throw it away. But this is not why I'm doing it. This is not the goal, the purpose why I'm doing it. Right? And so they have that check, and they have that system of keeping themselves always in line, and always ensuring that the reason why they're doing it is always, again, at the end of the day, going to be for the sake of Allah. And the mindset that they have, the goal that they have, the drive that they have, is doing it for the sake of Allah, purifying their heart from other wants, other goals, other desires, and things like that. So that was in the sense of having ikhlas, having sincerity, and cleaning our hearts, cleaning our minds, cleaning our intentions to be solely for the sake of Allah, and those things that sooner or later end up being for the sake of Allah. The opposite of that is going to be being insincere, doing things for other than the sake of Allah, wanting that recognition, wanting to be spoken about, wanting those rewards and benefits in this life. Right? And some of the terms that are used for that are riya. Another term would be sum'ah. Right? And just due to time, I don't know if we'll fully get into it, so we'll just briefly mention a few things about that so we can at least get started on it, and we can continue on that next time. Right? And so the opposite of this is going to be that we want other people to see what we do. Right? We want to show off. We want people to say, wow, that was amazing. Wow, that was good. Wow, you're so great. Right? And a slight distinction from a linguistic thing would be riya would be you want people to see you, and sum'ah would be you want people to hear about you. Right? But when we look at the word riya in and of itself, again, it has a meaning of seeing and vision and perception, that somebody can see something with their eyes, right? And so riya would be that, for someone to do something so that somebody else can see them. That I do something so somebody else sees me praying, sees me, teaching, sees me walking, sees me doing whatever it is that I'm going to do. And technically, riya would be ترك الإخلاص في العمل بمراعاة غير الله فيه. Leaving, abandoning sincerity, stepping away from doing something solely for the sake of Allah, and giving consideration, giving importance for something other than Allah. That I'm forgetting about the importance of doing so solely for the sake of Allah, and I want somebody else involved in that equation. I want somebody else to be in that act of worship. And Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah says that the root of riya is seeking status in the hearts of other people by making them see your good qualities. And again, like we mentioned before, it's just forgetting that Allah is the one that rewards. Allah is the one that forgives. Right? Allah is the one that's going to judge. We want other people to give us the little tiny good that they have. Whatever good human beings can give, that is what we strive for. That is what we're going after. Right? And so we want people to think highly of us. We want people to praise us. We want people to have good things to say about us. Right? And when we continue this discussion more next time, right, this is going to be an aspect of doing things in regards to acts of worship. That when I do something that I can get reward for, that is when I want other people to think about me. That is when I want other people to see me. And we'll end on this slight caveat that when we want people, it's not to say that we completely ignore people's perception, right? There's this concept, which is in one sense true, of only Allah can judge me. That's true. At the end of the day, only Allah is going to judge you. But human beings can be used as a barometer for what's right and what's wrong. Right? Somebody can say, I don't care what anybody says, and they're doing all the haram stuff out in public, and people saying, no, you can't do that. No, you're hurting people in the middle of the road. You can't do that. They're saying, no, I don't care what you have to say about that. Well, okay, no, there's some consideration that's given to people. There's some consideration that's given to people, right? A child may come, and be like, Mom and Dad, it doesn't matter what you tell me, you're not Allah. I'm trying to tell you what Allah is telling you is good and bad. I'm trying to tell you what is going to benefit you and what is going to harm you. So it's not that you completely throw away what people have to say, but people have a barometer, people have a gauge, and this is how we check what is right and what is wrong. They don't reward us and they don't punish us, but they give us an insight, they give us an inclination as to what is right and what is wrong, what's acceptable in society, right? And this is why even in a metaphorical sense, the example given is that we are weighed against this character of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That our actions are put beside that of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it's how do they match up? Are they in line or are they not in line? So it's going to be matched up to creation. It's going to be matched up to a human being. It's going to be matched up to people so that we can kind of gauge that. And perhaps in Allah's rahmah, in His kindness, and His gentleness with us, right? He knows what's going on in our time. He's not going to compare and weigh me against the Sahaba who are in a completely different generation. He's going to weigh and compare me against what I had access to, what was available to me, right? So the good that I do is going to fall short of what they did. And the bad that I do is far worse than what they did, right? But in my environment, what is the general overall good, general overall bad? So people can be used to gauge some sense of right and wrong. The whole point is that we don't seek their acceptance. We don't aim for their recognition and appreciation of us. We leave that for Allah. Inshallah, next time we'll talk a little bit more about insincerity, about riyā, and what are some ways to solve that, what are some ways to fix that, what are some ways to identify that. And we'll do that in the beginning of January, inshallah. Subhanallah bihamdihi, subhanallah al-azim, subhanaka wa bihamdik. How completely far from any form of imperfection you are, O Allah. All the praise and thanks belongs to you. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, there's nothing worthy of our worship or our devotion except for you. Nastaghfiruka, we seek your forgiveness. Wa natubu ilayka, we turn to your repentance. Wa sallallahu ta'ala ala khayri khalqihi Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsanin ila yawmiddin. Allahumma ja'alna minhum. Wallah, we end by asking you to bless, protect, honor, and compliment our beloved Prophet, our messenger, our role model, Muhammad Rasulullah, his family, friends, companions, and everyone that follows the way until the end of time. Allah includes from amongst them. Ameen. Assalamu alaikum.